Good evening and welcome to the Dad Lit Pod, the literary podcast for people who take the dog for a walk every morning, even though they never wanted the damn thing in the first place. I'm your host, Dan Roberts. I'm joined today by Dr. Alexander Marriott. Alexander Marriott is a Dad Lit triple threat. He is a dad. He writes Dad Lit. And in addition to that, reads Dadlet, namely my works, which is nice of him. He's also my best friend and a co-conspirator in writing manuscripts with me, and we do a lot of Dadlet work together. Wouldn't you say,
Is
Alex?
is this where I talk?
Yeah, this is where you talk. Feel free.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. You are officially scraping the bottom of the barrel to get me on the show, uh, but I appreciate it.
I
A
mentioned you're a
generous
doctor.
introduction.
I mentioned you're a doctor.
Yeah, but not a real one. I'm a doctor of history.
Yes. Oh, yes. And Alex is also author of a book, a detective novel, and a dad-lit novel, School of Homer. Who's the publisher, Alex? Pegasus?
Pegasus, publisher in the UK, and they will also be publishing the sequel to the School of Homer, Murder with a Glass of Malvasia, which should be out later this year.
Yes, both books, by the way, that I've had my fingers in, just like the pie.
Yes, and I think both books somehow came out better, even with your interference. I mean, help.
Also, in addition to this, at one of the characters from Alex's book, who's I believe mentioned in School of Homer, one
Yes,
he's mentioned he does make a an appearance in Murder with a Glass of Malvasia, uh, uh, is the
Uh,
protagonist of my first novel, Water Hazard, and that is Chief of Detectives Dick Bourneman,
yeah.
who is
The
retired
chief
in Water Hazard.
the chief of D's for the Chicago Police Department is Colvin's my detective hero's old boss, and he is referenced in a passive way in School of Homer. He's an active character in Murder with a Glass of Malvasia, and of course is the protagonist of Water Hazard. And
He is indeed.
he will also be playing a very prominent role in the third Virgil Colvin thriller, Midway to Death.
Midway to Death, which I believe I came up with the name for.
I believe you did have an
Yes,
essential role to titling that book, which
Midway to
is
Death.
it's a great title, and I look forward to completing the drafting of that also later this year.
And I am quite excited about that, as it will feature Dick Bourneman, it, who is a character I've come to know and love.
Yeah,
If you
and
want
the
some
the fun
pers
thing about that is, I'm sorry, Dan. I was just gonna say the fun thing about that is, of course, you've fleshed out that character a lot more in Water Hazard, and now I get to reverse engineer that fleshing out into Midway to Death, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, we've got a little crossover going. I'm reminded of that. Whenever people ask how it works, I say, well, there's that Simpsons episode where they do the spin-off series, and where the Simpsons spin-off series with Chief Wiggum is that him and Principal Skinner go down to New Orleans and are private detectives.
Hmm.
I like to think that if Virgil Colvin is the Simpsons, Dick Bourneman is the private detective in New Orleans. That episode,
That
which is a
I think
classic
that's
episode by the way, and everyone should watch it.
well, I think this is a wonderful dad lit reference, by the way, because only dads would recognize that particular deep dive into the Simpsons
Yeah,
early seasons.
25 year old Simpsons episode. So tell the audience about Virgil Colvin. I know him quite well, obviously. But what does Virgil Colvin do? Where is he? Why? And give me some more about him.
So Colvin is a retired Chicago homicide detective. He's in School of Homer, sort of touching base with the only thing that is still kind of left of his dead wife. His wife has had cancer. She's passed away. Their old haunts in Chicago are too fresh. Doesn't really like the homicide business anymore. Everything reminds him of his dead wife. So he goes to the one spot on Earth that, if it is going to remind him of his wife, is at least going to be in better times and not in her sort of death throes. So he goes to where they honeymooned, which is a small island in Greece. And that island, of course, I think is probably well known to most dad lit aficionados. It's the island of Ithaca. The ultimate dad, Odysseus, abandoned his family for at
Yeah,
least 20
classical
years.
Dadlet.
Abandoned his family for at least 20 years before returning to Ithaca to kill everyone who tried to take over his home. And Of course, a great,
Yeah, I
well-known
know.
story. So that
Let's pause. Yeah, let's pause just for a minute and reflect upon the Odyssey as early peak Dadlet. Dad goes off to fight a war. Everyone sits at home, awaiting his return with bated breath. Suitors try and replace him. His mother chooses to walk into the sea,
remember
and
the suitors don't show up right away. I mean, here's why it's great classic dad, because 10 years the war goes on. The war is finally won, and the people in Ithaca would start hearing about the return of all these people and the victory at Troy. But of course, Odysseus never shows up. Right? All these other people make it back to resume some version of their lives before, except for Odysseus. And that's the context in which people are now going to wait with bated breath. Is he just taking a long time? Did something happen to him? Are we going to hear that he's maybe being held hostage somewhere, for years? And then, eventually everyone's going to start whispering, he's dead, he's coming back. And then you start to get the suitors. The suitors start to
yeah,
arrive, sort of going, well, we've waited a respectable amount of time. If he were going to make it back, he would have, and it's time for Penelope to remarry. It's time for someone else to be the king. And of course, the great dad fantasy. He hasn't made it back, right? He's still alive. He's shacked up with a couple of floozies, the witch Circe and the sea nymph Calypso, and he's just not ready to come back. Now in the Odyssey, he's not allowed to come back. But if we want to give it a secular read, he's just not ready to come back to his home. He's too messed up from what happened to Troy. The 10 years of relentless killing and suffering,
so
and
what
that's
you're suggesting is that the psychological element of it is actually he's sort of a Boxcar Willie type character. He's uh, uh, can't get home uh, because he doesn't want to be home type figure.
that's kind of the modern literary read on Odysseus. Of course, in the poem, he's not allowed. Right? He's
Yeah.
angered the gods, and they will not allow him to return home until a suitable amount of additional punishment occurs. And of course, for everybody else in the poem, that all the other guys that survived the war, that means for them doom. Right? He's going to have
Yeah.
to suffer through watching all the men that he somehow got through the Trojan War die on the super long return voyage. That's also his fault. So the other great dad lit elements, by the way, are when he actually does make it back. The only entity that recognizes him is the dog. The dog that you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. That that he had to take for the walks, and it had been waiting for him for
Yeah.
20 years. Somehow, this dog had been waiting for 20 years. As soon as he arrives, it gives him a sniff, dies. Uh, and then of course the rest of it is trying to ingratiate himself back with his abandoned kid and his old lady, uh, and of course sealing that in blood. School of Homer is a little less
Yeah.
violent.
So how, just a tad bit. How starting with the obviously grounded in the mythos of the literary mythos of Ithaca. How then does Virgil Colvin's story? Because I don't want to ruin it for everybody. It's safe to say that it is a murder mystery that takes place on a beautiful Greek island with terrific food, and it's got a buddy element to it. How would you say that the that Virgil's story sort of runs or parallels Odysseus?
Well, the story of Odysseus is one of trying to find home again, and not ever really being certain that you'll get there, and if you do get there, is it really still home? Those are the kinds of themes that are always playing on Odysseus's mind. The fear of never actually getting back, but the equally important fear that even when you do get back, is it still the place you left? Are the people still the people you left? Do they still want you there? Is there still really even a place for you? And for Colvin, the story is not exactly parallel, but it has a lot of parallel elements in terms of this is a man running away from the place that has been his home for his entire life, Chicago. But he's looking for an element of that home that really mattered to him, right? Some ability to mourn his wife in a place where they were happy. Um, and of course, not knowing the language, not knowing the people of the island, he runs away halfway around the world and, of course, finds that he's still sad. He's still unable to kind of move past this horrible trauma. Um, he's still, in many ways, just the exact same person he was in Chicago that he sort of was trying to run away from. And so when we see him at the beginning of the book, you get a sense that even though he's made some sort of existence for himself over a course of about 6 months in Ithaca, he's still, uh, you know, uh, drinking way too much, socializing way too little, learning way too few words of the language, not really fitting in all sorts of ways. And of course, the one thing that will end up giving him a purpose is the one of the things he was running away from, which is a murder, and having to help his only friend on the island try to figure out, who did this killing, why. And of course, like I said, I won't give too much away, but the friend that he does have, is a natural friend for somebody like Colvin to make. It's the head policeman on the island,
So
named
you and I
Costas
did
Pantecalis. But
yes. Well, don't ruin it for them. They're gonna have to read it.
I'm not going to ruin it. Well, I don't think Costas Pantecalis'
You
name
know,
is
like
too
Costas
much of
will
a
ruin
giveaway.
it. I like Costas. I think Costas is actually my favorite character, other than Dick Borman, obviously. Dick Borman is a terrific character. But I was going to say, you went to Ithaca and have been back since, and you've done on-site research for you did it for School of Homer. You did it for Murder with a Glass of Malvassier. And you we did it in I did it
Chicago.
in Florida, and then we did you and I both went to Chicago to do some on the site research.
Yeah, and I
And,
think that's has been a really critical element of use an overblown word like authenticity, but creating the feel of the place, I think, is pretty important. And to have good sense of the layout of these locations where these things are happening. I think makes I always wanted the books that I was writing to have a real sense of place, uh, and you can embellish that with food and drink, but also just knowing the layout of a town people would have to deal with if they were there to traverse the landscape to hunt down a killer.
Yeah. And the you also do something that I really like, which is the sort of historical mythos and mystique of the place gets incorporated into the story. That the archaeology or the layers of history um, in both Ithaca and I can't remember what is the location in Malvasia.
Murder with a Glass of Malvasia is set in Monemvasia, which is on the southeastern edge of the Peloponnese. So, uh, anybody who's been to Greece, the Peloponnese is kind of this almost island that stretches from Corinth all the way down to Sparta and Kalamata, those sorts of places. Monemvasia, again, southeastern corner of the Peloponnese.
Yeah.
It's a cool place. It's this little peninsula that in medieval times essentially functioned as a trading fortress for the Byzantines and then the Venetians and then the Ottomans and over over hundreds and hundreds of years. And you can still go there today. There's been during the 20th century, a couple of architects spent a lot of time and effort kind of reinvigorating the place and restoring a lot of the buildings in the lower part of the town. So you've got 100 or so year-long residents who operate all the businesses, and during high tourist season, it's always pretty packed, and it's very charming, very lovely, just like Ithaca. And of course, my mind immediately went to how could you have a murder here? What would that look like? And yeah, you said in School of Homer, I tried to incorporate a lot of the mythological, historical elements of the island into the plot of that. Hopefully, with some success. In Malvasia, I went with some more recent geopolitics, energy issues, incorporating those into the uh, you know, deep historical setting of that novel. So hopefully that works as well. Like I said, it will be published later. It's already under contract, so I'm excited about that. Midway to Death has its own, as you know, because you've seen some of the outlining for that and everything. Has its own, of course, playing with history and setting for that book as well. And of course, some recent politics. As you know, it's always a little difficult to incorporate some of that stuff because it's always changing and evolving. But fortunately, I don't think I'm giving anything away on this. I have an Elon Musk esque character in Murder with a Glass of Malvasia, and I sort of added that before Elon Musk became such a even more well-known character in American society
Just a tad bit.
over the last 6 months or so. So the book was already in the can by that. I already had that character in there.
Yes.
So if Pegasus and I can ever get it out, I can strike while the iron is hot. People want to have a novel with an Elon Musk inspired character. He's there.
Yes. It's my most recent completed features a billionaire with a, a mysterious agenda as well.
Don't
Uh,
they all have them?
they all have mysterious agendas. Can we just
Well,
get like a normal billionaire, like,
well,
that's like,
Murder with the Glass of Malvasia has two billionaires, of course, and they both seemingly have fairly obvious agendas, but I think one of them is actually a bit more opaque.
yeah, yeah,
And I'll leave it at that. I'll let the reader figure it out. I don't want to say too much about it. The book isn't even out yet.
yes. So do you have any questions for me? I'm undertaking a podcast journey. I know you were confused as to what Dad Lit was. save to know that I write it. And you having read all of my stuff, you certainly would be able to recognize Dadlet from there.
Sure. No, when you talked to me about it, I hadn't heard anyone use that terminology to describe the kind of writing that you and I are doing in the fiction space, anyway. But I like it. It's I think even though I think we're not going to change the formula of who the basic audience is, because it's mostly still going to, I think, be predominantly female in terms of every book signing I've gone to, where I've talked to readers and signed copies of the School of Homer. It's vast majority of the readers who are really interested in the book are women. They tend to be a little older, and I think they're still going to be the backbone of any mystery novel or thriller's success. To be quite honest with you, I don't know what exactly it is in our society, but it seems like those kinds of books reach female audience more. But with all that said, I think those discerning dad mystery readers out there would definitely find a lot of, I think, appealing elements in the books that you and I have written.
Yeah, I think, well, you and I would say that you comp well with Jeff Siger, who's written a number of books also about Greece and mysteries set in Greece. And I recently finished um, I want to say Richard Osman's what is it, the two Thursday Murder Club?
Thursday Murder Club.
The Thursday Murder Club.
Yep.
Eh, I have mixed feelings on it. I suppose it could pass for Dadlet.
I think that book illustrates. I don't think it is Dadlin. I think it very clearly is aiming at the typical mystery reader, which, as I said,
Hmm.
is an older woman. If you want to just be very crude and demographic about it,
Yeah.
and if you think about the way that book is structured and who the main characters are and what's going on in that book, I think it's pretty clearly
So
geared toward that audience.
what would you say, excuse me, makes a mystery a Dadlet mystery? Uh, is it just that because for example, I think I've read your book, both your books, and you've read Water Hazard, which is based on a character for your books, and I think that ours actually tend to lean a little more into the dadlit genre than say Thursday Murder Club. And what do you think
Yes.
about them? Is it the presence of a strong kind of transgressive male interiority that does it? Because ultimately, we take Osmond's book with the Thursday Murder Club. It's mostly old ladies. That's the perspective you get is
Yep.
a sad police officer and a couple of old ladies. It's not exactly the perspective of your common everyday millennial dad or above. Uh, you know,
And even in the sense of well, you've added in the generational element. So
yeah,
Colvin's in his mid 50s, Boardman's older, in his early
yes,
60s. So these aren't millennial characters. I think one of the things that appeals to dads of our generation. So I guess both of us are very late millennials the way they do this thing in terms
yeah.
of the generational thing. I mean, I think I was sluiced into the millennial thing against my will. And but people of our age, our early 40s, I think are drawn to male protagonists who are not even necessarily super flawed, but have some sense of themselves and confidence about what they do. Um, certainly a vulnerability that's normal for a mildly healthy person, but not an obsessive desire to constantly explore it. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of good humorous elements to the books that I think any reader, but again, older fellas who have families like us would enjoy, because this is kind of an escapist fantasy in a lot of ways. And there's always a good friend element to these books. I mean, these aren't anti-heroes in the sense that they're like a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western character that has no real background and no ability to engage with other humans and
Yeah.
then disappears after all the killing is over. These are in some sense normal, well-adjusted guys who are good at what they do. And, when the shit hits the fan, no matter what other things you think about these characters or whether you'd want to actually spend time with them, you're happy they're there to deal with it. And I
Yeah.
think that is definitely, I think, a very dramatic, bigger version of what most dads imagine themselves to be. Whether you're not you would anyone wants to hang out with this dad or that dad. You want in your own mind as a dad to be the sort of person that if things get lousy, you're dependable, to be counted on as a competent person.
Yeah, I think that's an
So that
element of it. I would agree with that. I've thought about another friend of mine brought up the idea of the sort of dedicated or dutiful husband trope, and how that's come to dominate a lot of or the behaving husband sort of comes to dominate a lot of particularly fiction written by women. And I think that one of the ways that Dad Lit breaks from that is that the husband is not necessarily behaving. He's not necessarily, he's not, he has an interiority that's a little more rakish than I think most women would want to read. He thinks, this is, I think of, for example, a lot of women don't like the fact that Stephen King, when he writes his books, writes, "Oh, this 50-year-old woman, she's as beautiful as the day I saw her," and then it's like, yeah, that's really obnoxious and ageist and all that other stuff. But in reality, it's just a 50-year-old man thinking about his wife. Like, I'm sorry. But that's how he thinks, and he is a 50-year-old character. So, I think it's stuff like that um because this is going to be a big question, I think, on this podcast, because a lot of dad lit is mystery and crime dad lit. And to my mind, the what would define uh, books that would be targeted or good or appealing to dads comes down to elements of interiority like that with the characters.
Yeah, uh, that's an interesting idea. I mean, certainly with Bourneman, you have a character who I think, certainly from what I've heard of the women you've given that book to read, that you have a difficult character for women to cozy up to. And you're pretty blunt about that's on purpose, right? He's not a particularly successful character when it comes to women. And it's reflected throughout the book in various moments, right? That Boardman's a rough character even for the men he encounters, right? The women all react with some degree of revulsion, with the exception of one. And of course, for reasons I won't get into, that doesn't really work either. So,
Yeah.
uh, and we're including, people that that know Dick Boardman really well, his daughter.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, yes,
excuse me.
Alex is talking about our co-mutual character that we share across books. That is in my manuscript, which has not been published. Dick Borman is the protagonist, and he is living in Florida at an elder golf course where he is very unhappy because he is disabled and can't play golf, and he gets himself into a lot of trouble. And the comments that I have often got concerning Dick Borman are part of the thing that inspired this podcast, which is a friend of mine, a, a female friend of my millennial generation, who read Water Hazard and came out with it and said, you know, I actually really enjoyed this and I thought it was very funny, but I don't know how you would ever sell this on a shelf to anyone like me. I can't imagine looking at it and thinking, "Oh, I want to read this." This old man who's unhappy and solves a murder. I don't know why. I and that's where sort of Dadlit came from, which is she said to me, if my dad bought books, I'm sure this would be the type of thing he'd want to read. And to me, a lot of that is the origin of Dadlit. It's the book that if a dad bought a book, if he ever went out and got a book that wasn't a nonfiction book uh, about either George Washington or James K. Polk
I was going to say World War II, but
or
yeah,
World War II. Yeah, World War II. Yes.
I think the point is a good one, and again, it gets back to the fact that in this genre, and I picked my genre, my subgenre within the mystery field is international crime, obviously, because it's occurring in Greece, so it has this international element to it. International mysteries, I think, straddle both audiences. Right? There's always a neat travel aspect to an international crime. There's always fun. Everything that happens overseas is always embroiled in spies and some extra layers of mysteries that a crime in the United States is always bereft of. And that appeals to both groups of the gendered groups of readers. But yeah, I think your friend makes an excellent point because most of the publishers, most of the marketing for mysteries is geared toward women. So how do you sell a book like Water Hazard to them? Um, and I don't know because I'm not in marketing or publishing or
Yes.
representing
Yes.
authors. So no, I think it's always a fair question, and without having a subgenre of quote unquote dead lit to tap into, it's a challenge. The good thing is that when she did read it, she enjoyed it. So I guess you either you have to get it out there some way somehow, or find a way to get some gatekeepers who are women to vouch for. Hey, we can read this sort of book too, uh,
Yeah,
and enjoy it.
the potency of Water Hazard, the
Yeah, I'm
literary
sure.
potency.
I'm sure that'll be the. Well,
That's a selling
we've talked
line.
a lot. We've talked a lot about T.J. Newman. I don't want to go into her writing at the moment, but all the blurbs on the back of her books are male gatekeepers to the thriller and mystery genre. Right? So it's all
Yeah,
James Patterson. It's all Don Winslow. Um, and I think a version of that's obviously flipped the other way for Water Hazard would be the way to ingratiate yourself with the predominant reader of the genre while also maintaining the gritty, dad lit possibilities of the book.
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing that I think is going to come up a lot, and I have another interview with another author who's brought this up, which is that there seems to be almost a softening of the thriller genre, a sort of arcing away from when it was particularly male dominated in the past. And there's almost a wonder of what what sort of happened. Of why back then it was so effective and so popular, and why the sort of Carl Hyacins and the Elmore Leonards had such success back then, and whether that person today would have success.
Well, if you could get him on your podcast, it'll be a big score. But C.J. Box, all of his Joe Pickett novels are essentially what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, Joe Pickett is a dad. He has a family. He's a game warden. He gets sucked into all these murders. I think he's up to 26 or 27 murders. He's now been uh, tasked
Jesus,
with
man, I'm
figuring
gonna
out
be
is
I'm gonna be
is a game
perfectly
is a
honest.
game
If you
warden.
get if you get to a game warden state where you have 27 murders, the deterrent effect of your presence is questionable. Uh, I think I think we might consider bringing in some sort of alternative law enforcement regime to cut down on these murders. There's a poor
Well,
CJ Box's wife is like, we moved to the country to get away from this, CJ. Why?
yeah, yeah.
Yep. And now there's just murders right outside his door.
There's murder constantly afoot in the man's existence. But he's a responsible dad character. Half the book is him dealing with trying to investigate this murder while also raising kids and dealing with his wife who's constantly sort of, hey, I thought you were a game warden. You don't make any money. Why are you doing this murder investigation?
Yes.
Which is, I think, a fair question
Yeah.
to Joe, the character. But yeah, that's I mean, I
Well,
think
it's
he's right in there. And every time I go out to an event, I live in Houston. You didn't mention, so I'll tell the listener. We have a mystery bookstore in town, and you go to the events, and it's lots of older readers, and often can be predominantly women. But it's CJ Fox's events. It's a good mix. There's a lot of people who are both interested in the fact that he's this outdoorsman. I think is how he's doing the crossover in the Joe Pickett
Mhm.
novels. But he still has all these, the typical mystery readers, the older women, because of course they like good mysteries. And so I think he may be the one who at least is writing right now in this genre. Perhaps figured it.
That's found the way to cross over.
Like I said, he's got 27 of these Joe Pickett novels. And of course that's allowed him to write other novels too. So
Yeah.
he's got a few other characters roisting around. Of course, I think one of them is a woman. So he might have decided that he needed to lean more into that traditional
Yeah, he's like,
mystery mystery reader.
people got tired. People got tired of Joe Pickett.
Yeah.
Uh, he had one book where it was just a bear. It wasn't even a murder. They ruined it. It was just a bear. Pickett, I think that's just a bear. No, it's a murder. Shh. I need to get out of the house. It's definitely a murder. No, it's definitely a bear. There's a bear claw in his head. Yeah. No, this isn't true. I've never read any CJ Box.
It's hard to tell from your extemporaneous discussion there.
I
But
just
yeah,
can't get
the
over that the guy's out in the middle of the woods. He's dealing with 27 bodies.
this is one of those things. You read a C.J. Box novel, and you and I are going to see each other. I'll bring one, the first one
Okay, bring
of these
one.
Joe
Yes.
Pickett books, because what do I need it for at this point? I'll bring it to you, and you could read it. And you'll see that it has a lot of the trademark things that you see in a lot of mysteries now. But again, because the main character is this outdoorsman who is dealing with these rough and tumble characters,
Hmm.
out on the range, and lots of gunplay and things like that. You got a lot of elements that I think male readers are typically attracted to. I mean, maybe the ultimate example of this is Ian Fleming, right? You're talking about every James Bond novel is in many ways a prolonged male fantasy about always dressing in a tuxedo, always having the classiest things, always having the best drinks, always having the most beautiful women. Of course, the one thing that you don't necessarily know going into any James Bond novel is these would just be mercilessly beaten throughout the course of that book to within an inch of his life by the time you get to the end of it. So
Yes.
there's always a price to pay for these things, at least in that universe. And for whatever reason, maybe that is one of those elements of a good dad lit book. That, you want your character to for the danger element to be real, and you're not that interested in the kinds of things that happen in, say, Richard Osman's book, A Thursday Murder Club, where the danger is there, but it doesn't ever really seem all that dangerous.
Yeah. Well, uh, as we leave this particular pod, do you have any you want to plug your book?
Oh, well, the School of Homer is available everywhere you go online. It's in some select bookstores in the Houston area, but online is the easiest way to get it. If you would like a signed copy, I do have a Shopify store. I'll be more than happy to send you an autographed copy. And please continue listening to Dan's Dadlit podcast, because I think he's
Well,
going to have some great guests who are much more on the ball than me, and talking about their work. So I'm excited to see who you get on.
well, I'm excited too. I'm hopefully my computer makes it, and I've got some interesting guests planned. Some other triple threat, dadlet authors, writers, and readers. And it maybe even I'm hoping maybe even getting an agent on to discuss the market associated with Dadlet. I'm going to try and
Cool.
avoid inviting my own father on for as long as humanly possible because all he's going to do is advocate everyone read Portnoy's complaint and and be
Well, there you go.
unhelpful in
You already
that regard.
you already advocated it,
This
so
is
you've covered
completely
it.
unnecessary for him. Well, thanks, Alex. And I'm going to have you back, obviously, for some dadlet topic discussions for you and I. Uh, Definitely going to have you back when Murder with a Glass of Malvasia comes out. And look, if and when I ever sell Water Hazard, you'll be the first one to know.
I think, and the reader will get to discover this on their own, but I think it'll be a glass of red breast for everybody.
It'll be a glass of red breast for everybody. Well, thank you for coming on, Alex, and thank you all for listening. And all the best, and have a nice Dadlit Pod evening.